My name is David Elmore. I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, and I'm a retired scientist. I spent my career designing and building instruments that were used on solar telescopes around the world to try to understand what makes the sun tick. My lifetime, I enjoyed photographing the moon, stars, objects in the night sky as opposed to the sun, which was my daytime career. And in recent years, I've had an attraction to recording very faint, gorgeously colored objects in the night sky to use to show to people so they can better understand where we are in the cosmos, how big things are, how stars are born, how they die, how the gas distributes itself in the galaxy and then forms new stars, and to take photographs of those so that they can better understand what's happening. I needed to go to locations that were clear, that were also very dark in order to see these faint objects. So every month at new moon, I would look up where the long-range forecast said the closest dark, clear site would be. More often than not, I wound up in the boot heel of New Mexico and realized that perhaps what I ought to do is just leave my telescope here and then generate discussion about those particular images among a whole range of people. Those who just appreciate them for the choice of colors that were used to render the image, to those who use that information to try to understand whether these atomic species were excited to emit due to collisions or temperature or other mechanisms in the cosmos. So it varies on what the audience can be depending on what the forum is where it's posted. Another project I'm working on with a colleague is to identify previously unidentified objects in the galaxy. He will look at historic observations or even current ones from various observatories around the world, going back to the 40s from observations from Palomar or whatever, and identify objects that he thinks that no one else has seen before. And I will then train my telescope on that field of view and observe all night to see if indeed there is something there. On a daily basis, I'm coding new routines to control my telescope to look for these objects, new routines to look at the data that I've collected. And in that coding, I'm using geometry, matrix algebra, mathematical techniques that I've used all along, that I have used and relied upon throughout my career. Previously, I could use those techniques on various scientific projects to go to NASA or the National Science Foundation for securing grants to do research in those fields. But I was using those techniques that I had built, and I loved it. And I get a chance to continue doing that for this particular project that has a different end product than my career, but is beautiful and wonderful in its own way. I went straight through school, elementary school, high school, college, graduate school. And after graduate school, I joined the Sacramento Peak Observatory, which is in Cloudcroft, New Mexico, just south of there, a little town called Sunspot, as an observer. And while I was working there, I picked up more coding techniques, optical design, electrical design, and moved to Boulder, Colorado, where I worked building solar physics research instrumentation, moved into systems engineering, where I would be managing groups of people who were developing instruments. Eventually wound up with instruments that I had designed at observatories around the world. There are a couple of things in high school that have stayed with me. First, there's just the academics. There's learning the mathematics, learning the science, learning the communication skills that are somewhat dubious from time to time, but are necessary in order to communicate to other people what it is you're doing. Without those communication skills, what's the point? And then there were hobbies as I was going along. While I was in high school, I first experienced astronomy, and I had my own little telescope and took photographs of the moon and Jupiter. And so that has progressed throughout my life as well. Everyone has something to offer. That whoever it is you meet has their story, their experience, and that by communicating with that person, there is something that you can learn, something you can learn to appreciate about other people. So that's one thing I've tried to do ever since, is that each person I meet is what is unique and what can I learn from that person.